It was past 10 o'clock when the office fell silent. Lenora Grant stood behind her desk, eyes red. She spoke through the edge of tears. 2 years of it, she said. 2 years of being tired of playing his secret, tired of waiting for a man who only kept her close enough to love, but never close enough to claim. Darian didn't argue. He didn't apologize. He reached into his jacket, placed a key on her desk, then set a small velvet box beside it. Then he slid a folded document across the surface, and her name was printed right there on the property deed. His voice dropped low when he finally spoke. "Let's get married." Lenora thought she had misheard him, until his words made her burst into tears, because this was what she had been waiting for a very long time. If this kind of story is what you love, real emotions, complicated people, and love that actually costs something, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. A new story drops every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Darian Price was not the kind of man who walked into a room and demanded attention. He didn't need to. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet that made people lean in rather than tune out. As Chief Operating Officer of Grant Enterprises, he kept the machine running logistics operations, the unglamorous infrastructure that made the company's public victories possible. He was precise, composed, and relentlessly competent. His colleagues respected him. Some feared him a little. None of them knew he was in love with the CEO. He kept it that way on purpose. Darian had spent 2 years making sure no one in that building could accuse Lenora Grant of playing favorites. He arrived before she did. He left after she did. In meetings, he challenged her proposals when they needed to be challenged and defended them when they deserved defending, the same way he would have for any employer he respected. He never let their eyes hold a second too long across a conference table, never touched her shoulder in the hallway, never gave anyone a reason to whisper. Outside the office, it was different. But inside those walls, he was just her COO. He told himself it was professionalism. Some nights he knew it was also fear. Darian Price had been married once. It had not ended gently. His ex-wife, Tessa Lane, had walked out 6 years ago when their daughter Mila was 7 years old, not because Darian had done anything unforgivable, but because Tessa had decided that the version of her life she wanted didn't include the version of herself she'd become inside their marriage. She left. She moved 30 minutes away. She showed up when it was convenient and disappeared when it wasn't. Mila had grown up watching that. Now Mila was 13, sharp-tongued, perceptive, and carrying a kind of wariness in her eyes that no child should have to carry. She lived with Darian full-time. She did her homework at the kitchen table while he cooked dinner. She fell asleep on the couch during his late work calls and pretended she hadn't when he carried her to bed. She was the first thing he thought about every morning and the last thing on his mind every night. She was also the reason Darian had not said certain things to Lenora Grant that he had been meaning to say for a very long time. Lenora Grant had built Grant Enterprises from a mid-sized consulting firm into one of the most recognized financial management companies on the East Coast. She had done it before 40, as a black woman in an industry that had spent decades pretending people like her didn't belong at the top. She was sharp in the way that came from having to be twice as prepared just to be taken half as seriously. She trusted data, trusted systems, trusted the plans she built and executed with precision. What she did not entirely trust was this. Whatever this was, this thing she had with Darian Price that had no clean label, no official status, no conversation she could point to and say, "Here, this is where we agreed on what we are." They had been together in all the ways that word implied for 2 years. He remembered how she took her coffee. She knew when he was lying awake at 3 in the morning from the way he typed fast, distracted, irregular. He had held her through her mother's illness. She had been the first person he called when Mila fractured her wrist at soccer practice. They were woven into each other's lives in 100 quiet, unremarkable ways. And yet, he had never introduced her as his girlfriend, not to anyone who mattered, not to Mila. When people at work speculated about Lenora's personal life, and they always speculated, Darian said nothing. When his sister asked if he was seeing someone, he said he was focused on Mila right now. When Lenora had carefully and only once brought up what the future might look like for both of them, Darian had changed the subject so smoothly she'd almost missed that he'd done it. Almost. Lenora Grant did not miss much. She had stayed because she loved him genuinely, inconveniently in the way that made a woman who had spent her whole life being self-sufficient find herself checking her phone at midnight for no reason except that she hoped it was him. She had stayed because she believed in what she felt when they were together, and because she had told herself that Darian's silence wasn't rejection. It was just the way he processed things. He was careful. He was deliberate. He would get there. 2 years was a long time to wait for someone to get somewhere. It happened on a Tuesday. Lenora had come back early from a lunch meeting the client had canceled last minute, and she was walking past the small conference room adjacent to Darian's office when she heard his voice through the half-open door. Low, measured the way he sounded when he was trying very hard not to sound tired. She almost kept walking. She didn't. "Tessa, I hear you." A pause. "I'm not saying that. I'm saying Mila is doing fine." Another pause, longer. "I know what you think. You've told me more than once." Lenora stopped. She knew she should keep moving. She stayed. She couldn't hear Tessa's side of the conversation, but she didn't need to. She had heard enough about Tessa Lane over 2 years to fill in the blanks. What she could hear was the absence of Darian pushing back. "No, that's not fair. No, you don't get to make that decision." Just his voice, careful and non-committal, absorbing whatever was being said on the other end and giving nothing back. She left before he could see her. Back in her own office, she sat down and did not immediately open her laptop. She sat with what she had just felt. Not anger, not exactly. Something quieter and more corrosive. The kind of feeling that settles in when you realize something you already half knew has just been confirmed. Tessa Lane was telling Darian he shouldn't remarry, that Mila needed him fully undivided, that a good father stayed alone for his child. And Darian had not argued. Lenora turned that over in her mind for the rest of the afternoon. She was not a woman who catastrophized. She was not a woman who made decisions based on half a conversation overheard in a hallway. But she was also not a woman who ignored what was directly in front of her. And what was directly in front of her was this: after 2 years, the man she loved had still not said anything to anyone. And when someone told him he shouldn't, he had gone quiet. That night, she did not call him. For the first time in a long time, she didn't want to. She waited 3 days. Not out of strategy. Lenora wasn't interested in games, but because she needed to be sure she was going to say what she actually meant and not what she felt in the worst hour of the night. She needed to be certain she wasn't walking into his office to pick a fight. She needed to know the difference between what she felt and what she needed to say. By Thursday evening, she knew. She texted him just after 8. "Come to my office before you leave." He arrived 15 minutes later. The building was nearly empty, a few people still at their desks on the lower floors, but up here it was just the two of them. The city spread out through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the office lights were dimmed. Lenora was standing, not sitting. She hadn't offered him a seat and he hadn't taken one. He knew from the way she was standing that this wasn't a work conversation. "I heard you on the phone with Tessa," she said. She didn't preface it. She didn't soften it. "Tuesday. I wasn't trying to listen. I was walking by." Darian didn't flinch. "Okay. She told you not to remarry. She said a lot of things. And you didn't disagree with her." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't agree with her either." "Darian." Her voice was even. She had practiced even. "You not disagreeing with her is the same thing as agreeing with her. You know that." He looked at her, and for a second she saw something move across his face. Something that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite grief, but was maybe the combination of both. He opened his mouth. He closed it. That was when she knew she had to say the rest of it, because if she waited for him to fill the silence, she would be waiting all night. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and Mila," she said. "I've never asked you for that, and I never will. But I need you to tell me something, Darian, because I've been trying to figure it out on my own for 2 years now, and I'm tired." She paused, let the word land. "I need to know what I am in your life." He looked at her steadily. You know what you are. I know what I am when we're alone. She didn't raise her voice. I don't know what I am anywhere else. I don't know if you've ever said my name to your daughter in a context that meant anything. I don't know if you've ever told anyone we're together. I don't know if you ever planned to. She stopped. And I need to know. Not because I need a title, because I need to know whether you're actually building a future that includes me, or whether I've just been loving you in the dark this whole time. The room was very quiet. Darian stood there and she watched him, and for a long moment she genuinely did not know what he was going to say. She had braced herself for deflection, for, let's talk about this later, or, it's complicated with Mila right now, or any of the 10 variations of careful avoidance she had learned to recognize in him. What he said was, I'm not avoiding you because I don't want you, Lenora. Then what is it? He exhaled slowly. I'm not ready to say the rest out loud yet. Not because I don't know the answer, because I'm not done building what I want to give you before I say it. She looked at him for a long time. That's not enough, she finally said. Not anymore. She didn't ask him to leave. She didn't need to. She turned back to the window, and after a moment she heard him walk to the door. She heard him pause there. She didn't turn around. The door closed quietly behind him. Darian did not sleep well that week. He told himself it was work, a quarterly audit, a vendor contract that kept falling apart at the last clause. The usual friction of keeping a company the size of Grant Enterprises moving in one direction. He told himself it was not the look on Lenora's face when she turned back to the window. He told himself a lot of things that week and believed almost none of them. What he could not tell himself was that Mila was fine. She wasn't. He noticed it first at dinner on Friday. She sat across from him picking at her food, giving one-word answers to every question he asked. He assumed it was school. Mila moved through moods the way weather moved through a city fast and without much warning, so he didn't press. He asked if she wanted to watch something after dinner. She said she was tired. She went to her room at 8:30 and closed the door. The next morning, she was colder. By Sunday, she wouldn't meet his eyes. He finally sat down across from her while she was doing homework at the kitchen table and asked her directly, "Did something happen?" She looked up from her notebook. Her expression was careful in a way that 13-year-olds' expressions shouldn't be careful. "Mom called," she said. Darian kept his voice neutral. "What did she say?" Mila looked back down. "She said you've been spending a lot of time with someone from work." He was quiet for a moment. "She's right. I have." "She said it was serious." "It is." Mila's pen stopped moving. "She said if you married her, things would change." She paused. "She said you'd have less time for me, that you'd have a new family and I'd just be—" She stopped herself. "Mila," he leaned forward. "Look at me." She didn't immediately, but then she did. "What your mother said is not true," he told her. "You are not an afterthought. You have never been an afterthought. No one in my life will ever come before you, not in the way that matters. Do you understand me?" She nodded, but her eyes said she was still holding something back. That was the problem with what Tessa had done. It wasn't loud enough to argue with directly. She hadn't told Mila anything cruel. She'd just planted a seed in exactly the right soil in a 13-year-old girl who already knew what it felt like to be moved aside. Mila didn't need to be told she might get lost. She already feared it. Tessa had simply confirmed that the fear was reasonable. And Tessa hadn't done it because she was afraid for her daughter. She'd done it because it was the one remaining thread she could pull, the one way to stay tangled in Darian's life from a distance. Mila was the instrument, not the point. And Darian could see that clearly now, even if Mila couldn't yet. Over the following 2 weeks, Mila grew quieter around him. Not cruel. Mila was not a cruel kid, but distant in a way that she'd never been with him before. She stopped leaving her homework on the kitchen table. She ate dinner in her room twice without asking. When Darian mentioned carefully that Lenora might join them for dinner one evening, Mila had looked at him with an expression so carefully blank it was worse than anger, and said she had plans. She didn't have plans. Darian saw all of this, and did what he'd done his entire adult life when the ground shifted under him. He held still. He held still with Mila giving her space he hoped she'd eventually walk back from. He held still with Lenora keeping his distance in the office, answering her messages promptly but briefly, giving nothing that would make things harder to untangle if he said the wrong thing too soon. He held still, and the distance between him and everyone he loved grew wider. Lenora noticed. Of course she noticed. She didn't say anything because she had already said what needed to be said, and now it was his turn to act or not act. But she felt the withdrawal in the small things, the texts that used to come with no reason at all going quiet, the way he walked past her office door without stopping. She told herself she was not going to fill the silence this time. She had spent 2 years filling his silences. She told herself that. Most days she believed it. It was an accident. Lenora had gone to Darian's office to drop off a contract that needed his signature, something that could have been sent digitally, but that she had printed out because she was still, despite herself, looking for small reasons to be in the same room as him. His assistant was away from the desk. His office door was ajar. She knocked once, heard nothing, and stepped inside to leave the folder on his desk. That was when she saw the paperwork spread across the left corner of the desk. She wasn't trying to look. She truly wasn't. But the heading on the top page was clear enough to read from where she was standing: Property Purchase Agreement. And below it, an address in the Riverside district, the newer development, the one with the townhomes she'd driven past once, and said without really thinking about it that they had good bones. She set the contract down slowly. Her mind moved fast and quiet, the way it always did when it was processing something it didn't want to process. He was buying a house. A new house. He hadn't mentioned it. He hadn't said a word about it, not to her, not in any context, and she had told herself she wasn't going to catastrophize, but the facts were what they were. A new house. A new start for him and Mila, the two of them without her. She left before he came back. She sat in her own office for 20 minutes. Then she went back. This time she knocked properly. He was at his desk, jacket off, reading something on his screen. He looked up. Something in her expression made him sit back. "You were buying a house," she said. "I saw the paperwork. I wasn't going through your things, it was on the desk." He didn't look alarmed. He looked, if anything, like a man who had been caught not at something wrong, but at something he wasn't ready to show yet. "Yes," he said, "for you and Mila." He was quiet for a second. "Open the second folder," he said, "the one underneath." She didn't move. "Darian, Lenora," his voice was steady, "please open the second folder." She crossed to the desk and picked up the folder beneath the purchase agreement. Inside was a floor plan, handwritten notes in the margins, room labels, arrows. She could see Mila's room marked on one side of the upper floor. She could see home office on the other, and underneath it in his handwriting, L's space, good light from the east window. She turned the page. There was a draft of the property deed. Her name was on it. Lenora Grace Grant, printed in the co-owner field. She stared at it for a long moment. "I put your name on it 6 weeks ago," he said quietly. "Before any of this. Before Thursday in your office." She looked up at him. He wasn't moving from his chair. He wasn't performing anything, not relief that she'd found it, not urgency that she understand. He was just watching her with that particular steadiness he carried when something genuinely mattered to him. "There's a room with a garden view on the ground floor," he said. "You told me once 2 winters ago we were driving past a house in the snow, you said you always wanted a kitchen with a garden window, something you could look out of in the morning." He paused. "I didn't forget." Lenora set the folder down. She felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't realized was knotted. And then, almost immediately, she felt the grief underneath it because this was proof that he had been thinking of her, planning around her, building toward her the entire time. And she had spent 2 years not knowing. She had spent 2 years wondering if she was real to him. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, not accusatory, just honest. "Darian, why didn't you just tell me?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I wanted it to be right before I asked you. I didn't want to say the words and not have anything behind them." He looked at his hands briefly, then back at her. "I thought I was being careful. I didn't understand until recently that careful looks a lot like absence from the outside. She exhaled slowly. It does, she said. It really does. The room was quiet for a moment.
I love you,
he said, simply. Not as a pivot, not as a deflection, just as the truest thing he had available. I have loved you for a long time, and I've been doing it privately when you deserved so much more than that. She looked at him for a long time before she answered. You haven't been doing it badly, she said. You've been doing it quietly. But Darian, I can't keep loving you quietly. I need to be real. He nodded slowly. I know. Neither of them said anything more. But something had shifted in the room, not resolved, not finished, but no longer moving in only one direction. 2 nights later, Darian sat down with Mila. He had chosen the timing carefully. After dinner, homework done, no screens, just the two of them on the couch, the way they'd sat since she was small. He told her he wanted to talk about Lenora. He told her calmly, without pressure, that Lenora was someone important to him, that she had been for a while, that he wanted Mila to know that honestly, not from a distance. Mila listened. She pulled her knees to her chest and listened with her face carefully composed. And when he finished, she looked at the middle distance for a moment before she said, If you marry her, I'm going to go live with Mom. Darian felt the floor drop out from under the sentence. He kept his voice even. Where is that coming from? I'm just saying. Mila's jaw was tight. If things change, I'd rather just go. Mila, this family is you and me. That doesn't change.
It already changed.
She finally looked at him, and what he saw in her eyes wasn't anger. It was fear, the kind that had been building quietly for weeks. You're different. You're distracted. And she's always just there, and I don't know where that leaves me, Dad. I don't know if there's still enough room. Darian opened his mouth. He closed it, because the truth was, he didn't have a clean answer. He couldn't tell Mila that nothing would change because that would be a lie, and Mila was too perceptive for lies. Things would change. He was asking her to absorb a significant change at 13 years old in the middle of a life that had already asked too much of her. He understood why she was scared. He understood it completely. What he couldn't make her understand, not yet, not that night, was that the change he was asking her to accept was not a subtraction. He didn't have the words for it yet. Or maybe he had the words and knew she wasn't ready to receive them. He put his arm around her and she let him stiffly at first, then less so. I'm not going anywhere, he told her. And I'm not replacing anyone. I just need you to trust me a little longer. She didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. That was the best he was going to get. He didn't tell Lenora the details of that conversation. He gave her the broad shape of it. Mila was struggling. He was trying to handle it carefully. He needed a little more time. And Lenora, who had said she was done waiting, found herself waiting anyway, because she understood something about Mila that she hadn't admitted out loud yet. She didn't blame the girl, not even slightly. Mila was 13 years old and she'd been failed by the adult who was supposed to make her feel secure. And now she was trying to protect herself the only way she knew how. Lenora didn't say any of this to Darian. She just said, I'm not going anywhere. And then more quietly, but Darian, stop protecting everyone from the truth, including me. I'm not asking you to rush. I'm asking you to stop making me invisible. He heard her. She could tell he heard her. But hearing and doing were different things. And by the following week, the strain was visible on him in the sharpness around his eyes, the way he held his jaw, the subtle slowing of his responses in afternoon meetings. He was carrying too much and distributing none of it because that was what he did. He held things alone. He had been holding things alone since Mila was 7 years old and Tessa walked out, and he decided that collapsing was not an option. He had been deciding that for 6 years. And there are only so many years a person can make that decision before the body makes a different one on their behalf. It was a Wednesday. Darian had come in early and stayed late, pushing through a migraine he'd had since Monday and a low-grade exhaustion that had moved past tired into something heavier. By 7 in the evening, the floor had cleared out. He told himself he'd finish the report he was working on and then go home. He made it as far as the sofa in the corner of his office. When Mila arrived at 8:15, she'd texted him twice, gotten no response, and taken the subway from her after-school program because it was fine. She was 13. She could handle it. She found the office door unlocked and her father lying on the sofa with his jacket still on, face flushed, breathing too shallow for sleep. She froze in the doorway, then she moved. She put her hand on his forehead and pulled it back. He was burning up. She shook his shoulder and he stirred but didn't wake properly, just murmured something and turned his face away. Mila grabbed her phone and called her mother. It rang 4 times. Tessa picked up and Mila heard noise in the background. Voices, music, the particular hum of a restaurant. "Hey, baby, what's up?"
Mom.
Mila's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Dad's sick. I'm at his office and he won't wake up properly and I don't know what to do." A pause. "How sick?" "He has a fever. A bad one. Mom, I don't know what to do." Another pause. Longer. "Okay, listen. He's probably just run down. Get him some water, okay? I'm sure he'll be fine. I'm kind of in the middle of something right now, but call me if it gets worse." The line went quiet. Mila stood in the middle of her father's office with her phone in her hand and looked at the man on the sofa who had not missed a single one of her school pickups, who had learned to braid her hair after 3 YouTube tutorials and 2 failed attempts, who had never once told her she was on her own, and she understood something about her mother in that moment that she had not let herself understand before. Tessa Lane had not spent 2 years warning her daughter about losing Darian because she was afraid for Mila. She had done it because it was the one remaining way to reach into his life and feel like she still mattered in it. Mila was the instrument, and tonight when the instrument actually needed her, she was busy. Mila sat on the edge of the sofa beside her father and stared at her phone. Then she opened his messages. She wasn't looking for anything specific, she just needed to think, and her hands needed something to do. She scrolled past work threads, past his sister's name, past her own, and stopped on Lenora's name near the top. The most recent message from Lenora was from 2 days ago. Mila almost scrolled past it. She didn't. "I don't need you to be strong all the time. I just need you to let me be there when you're not." Mila read it twice. Then she sat very still for almost a full minute. She looked at her father. She looked at the message. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone, distracted, already halfway gone before she even hung up. Then she opened a new message to Lenora and typed with hands that were not quite steady. "This is Mila. My dad is sick and I'm at his office and I don't know what to do. Can you come?" She sent it before she could think too hard about it. 40 seconds later, Lenora replied, "I'm on my way. Don't leave him." Mila put the phone down and exhaled for the first time since she'd walked through the door. Lenora made it to the building in under 20 minutes. She had been home, changed out of her work clothes, halfway through a bowl of soup she wasn't really tasting when the message came through. She read it once. She read it again. Then she put down the bowl, picked up her keys, and left without stopping to think about what it meant that Mila had been the one to call her, because thinking about that could come later. And right now, Darian was alone and sick, and his daughter was scared. The lobby security guard recognized her and waved her through without a word. The elevator ride up felt longer than it ever had. When she reached the floor, the hallway was dark except for the light coming from under Darian's office door. She pushed it open slowly. The scene inside was quieter than she'd expected. Darian was on the sofa, jacket still on one arm across his chest, breathing in a way that was too uneven for sleep. The lamp in the corner was on, casting a low amber light across the room. And Mila was sitting on the edge of the sofa beside him, straight-backed, hands in her lap, holding herself together with the particular rigidity of someone who was not going to cry, because crying would mean she had lost control of the situation. She looked up when she heard the door. Lenora stopped in the doorway. She did not walk in. She did not immediately assess the room and start taking charge the way she would have in any other context, in any professional situation where she was the most competent person present and action was required. She stopped and she looked at Mila, really looked at her, and she understood something important about this moment. This was not her room to walk into. Not yet. She stayed in the doorway and said quietly, "Can I come in?" Not to Darian, to Mila. Mila blinked. It was a small thing, barely a flicker, but Lenora saw it. Saw the surprise cross the girl's face before she could organize it into something more guarded. Because no one had asked her that. No adult in recent memory had stood at a threshold that belonged to her in any sense of the word and asked her permission to cross it. Mila didn't answer with words. She shifted slightly on the sofa just a few inches, making space, and looked back at her father. Lenora took that for what it was. She came in. She set her bag on the desk, crouched beside the sofa, and pressed the back of her hand to Darian's forehead the same way Mila had an hour ago. He stirred slightly at the touch, eyes not quite opening, something between a word and a breath escaping before he settled again. The fever was high, not dangerous yet, but high enough. "Has he had any water?" she asked. "I tried. He didn't really—" Mila stopped, started again. "He took a few sips and then went back under." Lenora nodded. She didn't say "you did the right thing" or "good job" or any of the reflexive reassurances that would have made this about Mila's performance. She just nodded like it was a fact, like Mila had simply done what needed doing, and that was expected because Mila was capable. Then she stood, went to Darian's small office bathroom, and came back with a damp cloth and a fresh glass of water. She pressed the cloth to his forehead. He exhaled. She pulled out her phone and made one call to a doctor she knew well enough to call after hours, who agreed to come by within the hour, and asked her a series of questions she answered clearly and without panic. When she hung up, she found Mila watching her. "Is he going to be okay?" Mila asked. "Yes," Lenora said, not as comfort, as fact. "His fever's high, but it's not alarming. The doctor's coming to check him properly. He needs fluids and rest and someone to make sure he doesn't try to get up and answer emails." The last part was so specifically accurate to Darian that Mila made a sound, not quite a laugh, but in the same neighborhood. They sat in the quiet for a while after that. Lenora didn't try to fill it. She didn't ask Mila how school was going or what she'd been up to or any of the conversational scaffolding adults erected when they didn't know how to just be in a room with a teenager. She sat on the chair she'd pulled close to the sofa and kept the cloth cool on Darian's forehead and let the silence be what it was. After about 15 minutes, Mila said, "I called my mom first." Lenora looked at her. "I know. She said she was busy." Lenora didn't respond to that. She didn't editorialize, didn't agree, didn't fill the space with sympathy that would have forced Mila to either accept or reject it. She just let Mila say the thing she needed to say. Mila looked at her father. "I didn't want to call you," she said. Not unkindly, just honestly. "I know that too," Lenora said. "But I read what you said to him." Mila's voice was careful. "The message, about not needing him to be strong all the time." Lenora nodded slowly. "Did you mean it?" Mila asked. Lenora looked at the girl directly. "Yes." Mila considered this. She looked at her father's face, slack now fever-flushed, stripped of the composure he wore like a second skin in every waking hour. He looked, Lenora thought, like what he actually was, a man who had been holding too much for too long and had simply run out of room. "He never lets anyone help him," Mila said quietly. "No," Lenora agreed. "He doesn't. It's annoying. Extremely." This time Mila did laugh, short, surprised, a little reluctant, but real. The doctor arrived at 10:40. He confirmed what Lenora had assessed: fever from exhaustion and a respiratory infection that had been ignored for probably a week longer than it should have been. He administered something to bring the fever down, left a prescription, and told them both that the patient needed to sleep, drink fluids, and not be allowed near a laptop until his temperature normalized. After the doctor left, Lenora made Darian drink half a glass of water. He was conscious enough by then to comply, though barely, and then she settled back in the chair. She had not mentioned leaving. She had not looked at her phone. She was simply still there. Mila had moved back to her spot at the edge of the sofa. At some point, her posture had loosened, not completely, but enough. She was no longer holding herself rigid against something. She was just sitting. Around midnight, Mila fell asleep against the arm of the sofa, one hand near her father's. Lenora sat in the chair across from them and did not sleep. She sat with the low lamp and the quiet city outside, and the particular intimacy of this moment that she had not asked for and had not planned, but that felt in some undeniable way like the truest thing that had happened between her and this family in 2 years. She hadn't walked in and taken over. She hadn't made herself necessary. She had just shown up and stayed, not as a replacement for anyone, not as a new authority, but simply as someone who loved Darian Price, and by extension, could not be indifferent to the girl who loved him most. Darian woke at 6:15 to gray morning light and the distant sound of the city coming back to life. He lay still for a moment, cataloging sensations the fever had broken. He could feel the difference, the way his head was clear in a way it hadn't been in days. The cloth on his forehead was cool and slightly damp. He was covered with his own jacket and something else, a blazer he recognized as Lenora's. He turned his head. Lenora was asleep at his desk, head on her folded arms, hair loose, still in the clothes she'd been wearing the night before. Her phone was face down beside her hand. Beside him on the sofa, Mila was curled into the corner, sleeping with her cheek against the armrest. Darian lay still and looked at both of them. He thought about what it had cost Mila to make that call. He knew his daughter knew her pride, her stubbornness, the particular armor she had built and polished over years of learning that depending on people created specific kinds of pain. She had called Lenora. In the middle of the night, alone and scared, she had reached for the person she had spent months holding at arm's length. He knew what that meant. He knew what it had cost. And Lenora had come. She had not sent a message asking what was needed or whether it was appropriate or whether Mila would be comfortable. She had simply come, and she had stayed. And from the look of the room, she had spent the night in that chair and not once made it about herself. Mila stirred about 20 minutes later. She blinked, oriented herself, saw her father watching her. "You're awake," she said. "I'm awake." She straightened up, pulled her knees in, and looked at him with an expression that was working very hard to be casual. "How do you feel?" "Better," he said. "A lot better." She nodded. She glanced at Lenora, still asleep at the desk, and then back at him. She was quiet for a moment. "She stayed all night," Mila said. "I can see that." Another silence. "She asked if she could come in," Mila said. "When she got here. She stopped at the door and she asked me." She paused. "She didn't just walk in." Darian looked at his daughter carefully. "Did that matter to you?" Mila was quiet for long enough that he thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she said, "I'm still scared, Dad. I don't know how this works. I don't know what it's going to feel like." "I know. But—" She stopped, tried again. "Mom didn't come, and I called her first." She looked at her hands. "I kept thinking Lenora was going to try to take over or tell me what to do or I don't know. But she didn't. She just stayed." Darian said nothing. He let his daughter say the thing she was working toward in her own time. "If she really loves you," Mila said finally, quietly, still looking at her hands, "then I'll try. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I'll try." Darian reached over and put his hand over hers. She turned her palm up and held on. Later that morning, after Mila had gone to get breakfast from the cafe downstairs, and Darian had managed to sit upright without the room moving, he called Tessa. He had considered waiting. He decided not to. She picked up on the second ring, voice bright in the way it got when she was bracing for something. "Hey, Mila told me you weren't feeling well, are you—" "I'm fine," Darian said. "Mila called you last night." A pause. "She did. It was a complicated night for me. She was alone with me in an empty office building and she didn't know what to do," he said. His voice was quiet. He had decided before dialing that he was not going to do this with anger. Anger was a form of engagement, and he was done engaging with Tessa in ways that gave her purchase in his life. "She called you first. You told her you were busy." Tessa was quiet. "I'm not calling to argue," he continued. "I'm not calling to go back over what you said to her about me and Lenora. I'm done going back over things." He paused. "I'm calling to tell you that what you've been doing using Mila to get to me is finished. She's 13 years old and she spent last night scared and alone because of a choice you made. I don't think you intended it to go that way, but it did. Another silence. Longer. Darian. I'm not asking for an explanation, he said. I just need you to hear this. The decisions I make about my life, including who I choose to be with, are mine to make. Mila will always be our daughter, and that won't change. But she's not a message to send me, not anymore. He waited. Tessa said nothing for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than he'd heard it in years. I didn't mean for her to be scared. I know, he said, and he did. He didn't think Tessa was evil. He thought she was someone who had never fully processed losing a life she'd chosen to leave, and who had found a way to stay tangled in it through the one person neither of them would ever stop caring about. But intention doesn't cover all the ground, Tessa. You know that. She didn't answer. He said goodbye and hung up. There would be no dramatic confrontation after that, no final reckoning. Tessa would still be Mila's mother, that was permanent, and Darian had never wanted it otherwise. But the version of Tessa that had lived in the margins of his decisions, whispering doubts and planting fears, had lost her footing the moment Mila picked up the phone and called someone else. That hold was gone. Not because Darian had taken it away, but because Tessa herself had let it slip on the one night it actually mattered. He sat with the phone in his hand for a minute. Then he set it face down on the desk and felt something loosen in his chest that had been there so long he'd stopped noticing it. Lenora walked back into the office from the small bathroom down the hall, hair pulled back, the slight tiredness of a sleepless night visible in her face in a way she would not have permitted in front of anyone else. She stopped when she saw him sitting up. You should still be horizontal, she said. I've been horizontal for 12 hours. 11 and a half. She came and sat in the chair across from him. She looked at him steadily. How do you feel? Human, he said. Finally. She nodded. She looked like she was going to say something practical about the prescription, about the rest of the week, about the items on his calendar that would need to move. That was Lenora when she didn't know what to do with tenderness. She reached for logistics. He said, Thank you. She stopped. For coming, he said. For staying. For asking Mila before you walked in. He paused. She told me. Lenora was quiet for a moment. She was the one who mattered last night, not me. Both of you mattered. He looked at her. You matter, Lenora. You have always mattered. I've just been too careful and too slow and too afraid of getting it wrong to say it the way it deserved to be said. She held his gaze. Darian. Not yet, he said. I have something I need to do first. Tonight. Give me tonight. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. He came to her office at 9 o'clock that evening. He had gone home, slept for 4 hours, showered, taken the medication, and eaten something real. He had called the building concierge to make sure he'd be able to get back up after hours. He had sat at the kitchen table for 20 minutes with a folder he'd been keeping in his desk drawer for 6 weeks, making sure everything in it was in order. Then he had driven back to the building. Lenora's light was still on. It was always still on. When he knocked, she called him in. She was at her desk reading something on her laptop, still in her work clothes, even at this hour. She looked up when she saw him, and something in her expression shifted, not alarm, but attentiveness. She knew from the way he was standing that this was not a work conversation. She closed the laptop. Darian came to the desk and set 3 things on the surface in front of her one by one without rushing. First, a key. Brushed silver new on a plain ring. Second, a folded document. She recognized the format before she opened it. Property deed, Riverside District. She opened it anyway. Her name was there, same as it had been the first time she'd seen it, except now it was on the final executed version rather than a draft. Lenora Grace Grant, co-owner. Third, a small velvet box. He opened it himself and set it on the desk without placing it in front of her like a presentation. Just set it there open, the ring inside catching the low office light. Lenora looked at the 3 objects. She looked at him. He didn't reach for her hands. He didn't kneel. He stood on the other side of the desk from her in the way they had stood across from each other 100 times over 2 years of working in the same building and he spoke to her the way he always spoke when something genuinely mattered directly, without performance, with the full weight of what he meant behind every word.
"I didn't avoid you because I wasn't sure," he said.
"I avoided saying things out loud because I was afraid of saying them before I had something real to put behind them. I thought I needed the house finished, the ring ready, everything settled before I had the right to ask. I thought I was being responsible." He paused. "I was being a coward dressed up as a planner." She didn't say anything. Her hands were flat on the desk, very still.
"I've had your name on that deed for 6 weeks," he said.
"I chose a room for you before I'd told you I was buying the house. I've been building toward you this entire time, Lenora, and I never once let you see it. I kept you in the dark and told myself it was because I wanted it to be right. But you were out there thinking I was keeping you a secret, thinking you didn't have a place in my life, and I was the reason for that. Not Tessa, not Mila, me." He stopped, took a breath.
"Mila told me this morning she'll try,"
he said. "Not because I pressured her, because she saw who you are last night and she decided on her own. And I'm done waiting for every condition to be perfect before I say what I should have said a long time ago." He looked at her steadily, the way a man looks when he has finally stopped protecting himself from his own feelings. "Marry me, Lenora." The office was very quiet. Outside the windows, the city moved and pulsed and lit itself against the dark sky the way it always did, indifferent to the things people decided inside buildings. Lenora stood on her side of the desk and looked at the man across from it, this careful, stubborn, deeply loving man who showed his heart in floor plans and property deeds and a room with an east-facing garden window, and she understood something she hadn't fully understood until this moment. His silence had never been the absence of love. It had been the shape of how he carried it. He carried love the way he carried everything, deliberately, without fanfare, making sure the foundation was solid before he invited anyone to stand on it. It was maddening. It had cost both of them something real. But it was also undeniably him, and she had fallen in love with him, not with a simpler version of him. She reached out and touched the ring. Didn't pick it up, just touched it. Then she looked at him and said, "Yes." His shoulders dropped, barely, just slightly, the release of something he'd been holding for a very long time. He came around the desk and picked up the ring and took her left hand in both of his, and he placed it on her finger slowly, the way you do something you intend to be permanent. She let him. She watched his hands. When he looked up, her eyes were bright. "But Darian," she said. He waited. "Don't ever make me love you in the dark again." He held her hand in both of his and said, "Never again." What came after was not a single moment, but a series of small, unremarkable ones that added up to something new. Darian stopped keeping her at a professional remove in the office. Not in a way that was performative or sudden, just in the way that a man stops pretending something is true when it isn't. He mentioned her name in contexts where he hadn't before. He didn't announce anything, he simply stopped hiding. People noticed. People would always notice. He found to his own mild surprise that he didn't particularly care. Mila did not transform overnight. She was 13 and complicated and still figuring out her own feelings, and Lenora did not expect or ask for her to be any different. Lenora brought her coffee, once the specific kind Mila had mentioned liking once casually weeks ago, and did not make a production of it. Mila looked at the cup for a moment, said thank you, and went back to her homework. That was the whole exchange. It was enough. The house in the Riverside district closed on a Thursday in November. The three of them walked through it together on a Saturday morning. Darian with keys, Mila with her hands in her pockets, Lenora a step behind, letting Mila choose which room she wanted to see first. She chose her own. She stood in the doorway of the room Darian had marked on the floor plan 6 weeks before she knew it existed, and she was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned and looked at Lenora. "He picked this room for me before he even told you about the house," Mila said. "I know," Lenora said. Mila looked back at the room. "That's kind of a lot." "He's kind of a lot," Lenora said. Mila made the sound again, the one that was almost a laugh and then became one, fully this time. And Lenora let it land without doing anything to it because it didn't need anything done to it. It was just the beginning of something. Small and real and not yet fully formed. The kind of beginning that didn't announce itself, that didn't come with a ceremony or a grand declaration. Just a girl laughing in a doorway and a woman letting her and a man down the hall in the kitchen talking on the phone to his sister and saying for the first time in 2 years her name. And we're engaged in the same sentence. One evening, weeks later, Lenora was at her desk when Darian stopped in the doorway of her office the way he'd done 100 times before. She was looking at something on her laptop. He didn't say anything right away. She didn't look up immediately. Then she felt him looking at her, and she looked up and she saw the expression on his face, that specific, unguarded thing she'd only ever seen when he thought she wasn't watching, and she felt the warmth of it the same way she always had. Except now it didn't carry the low ache of uncertainty underneath it. She looked at the ring on her hand, then back at him. "Do you know what surprised me the most?" she asked. He leaned against the doorframe. "The ring." "No," she smiled. "That you finally let me stay." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, not in a hurry, in the unhurried way of a man who knew he had time now, and he sat down across from her, and they stayed there together in the lit office while the city darkened outside, and neither of them went anywhere. There's something in this story that stays with you long after it ends. Darian didn't love Lenora carelessly. He loved her in floor plans and property deeds in a garden window he remembered from a passing conversation 2 winters ago. He loved her in every small, deliberate way a man who has been hurt can manage. Quietly, carefully, and completely out of view. And that was exactly the problem. Because love, no matter how sincere, has to be seen to be felt. The person on the receiving end can't live inside your intentions. They can only live with what you show them. And Lenora, strong, patient, deeply capable Lenora, had been living with an absence that wasn't real for 2 years. That's the thing about people who love carefully. They think preparation is the same as presence. They think when everything is ready, I'll say so. And in the meantime, the person they love is quietly wondering if they matter at all. You don't have to be perfect before you let someone in. You just have to be honest. And as for Mila, she teaches us something too. That a child who feels seen will eventually choose to see. That the hardest walls to move aren't the ones built out of anger, but the ones built out of fear. And that sometimes all it takes is one person standing at a doorway asking permission instead of demanding entry. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, we'd love for you to be part of this community. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below telling us which moment hit you the hardest, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. New stories drop every week, the kind that stay with you. We'll see you in the next one.